Hey everybody! This video is for the tie sleeves on the new Cassidy Peplum and Dress. So it actually calls for 8 pieces, and that will be 4 sets of 2. Right here I have 4 pieces, which is enough for 1 sleeve. So it is a little bit of a fabric hog, but they're super cute. So I think you're really gonna like it. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna sew with a stretch stitch and a 1/4 inch seam allowance down the middle and around the tie. If you have a walking foot, now is a great time to use it. If you don't, make sure that your fabric is not getting stretched out, because then your tie will end up really long. You need to make sure that it's moving evenly and easily underneath your presser foot. I recommend using a regular sewing machine because we're going to trim the seam allowance to make it easier to get this tie turned right side out. So first things first, I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine, sew down the middle and around the tie and across the bottom. I'll be right back. I have my pieces sewn together here with a stretch stitch and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to trim the seam allowance around the curve and around the tie. You want to get pretty close to the stitches without cutting them. That's really important, because if you cut the stitches, well, your garment's going to fall apart. This will help the end look a lot nicer. It'll just help the whole thing look a lot nicer. But it also makes it much easier to turn right side out. You can actually go ahead and do it all the way up. It doesn't really matter. That way it's just the same. So I've done one, and now I'm going to do this one. I use a rotary cutter, but you can just as easily use scissors. I had one place where I actually got the fabric shifted a little bit, and that's okay because I'm trimming the seam allowance now, but also when this is on, this is actually for a child, but when it's on the child, you're not going to be able to notice. So here are my 2 pieces of 1 sleeve. It's actually 4 pieces, but 2 sets. I'm going to turn it right side out. I have a bamboo knitting needle that I use to help me get this out. If you have chopsticks or unsharpened pencil, really anything can help. I don't like using this because it's a little pointy, but it's what I have. You just want to be careful that you don't poke a hole through your seam or anything like that. I try and remind myself that slow and steady wins the race. There we go. Okay, I have both of my pieces turned right side out. Now I'm gonna go press them so that they look a lot nicer. These have been sewn down the top and around the tie and turned right side out and then pressed. The next step is to pick them up and open up the top of the sleeve. And if you have a seam allowance in there, you can open it or push it to one side. If you've trimmed it, it doesn't really matter. But you're going to take both of your sleeves and match them seam to seam. And then on one side, so I'm going to open up my seam allowance and I'll actually take it over and press it open. But then you're going to take it over to your sewing machine and sew in the ditch here between the two just for 1/2 inch to hold the seam together at the top. So here it is sewn and you can see it's just barely attached together here at the top. This just makes insertion into the bodice a little bit easier. So the final step is to open up, you have 2 loose edges, right? This is the part that will attach to your bodice, and this is the underarm seam. This is the underarm seam of the sleeve. So I'm going to match these up. And again, seam to seam and edge to edge. And I'm going to sew them all the way down. So I'm going to sew from the top to the opposite top. Again, here on the seam, you can either push it in either direction or open up your seam allowance. It's up to you. So here's that seam. Now I'm going to fold it back. And I'm going to press it real quick just to get that to lay down nicely. All right, so now it's starting to look a little bit like a sleeve. Maybe? So you have your ties. This is the top of the shoulder. So if I lay it out flat, this is your shoulder, underneath your arm, your sleeve seam, and this is the hem. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here at the seam, and I'm going to top stitch it all the way down and around the tie, up, and then I'll go straight across on top to the other side, go all the way down and around the tie, and then meet back up at my underarm seam. You can use a long straight stitch for this, or a stretch stitch, or a zigzag, pretty much anything you want. Okay, I've now top stitched all the way around. And I really think that just is going to help it stay really nice looking. You won't have to press it every time you wear it. I would give it a long press right now along all my stitches just to help them really look nice. But now you're ready to insert your sleeve into the bodice. So I have my front here and my back. And I'm going to go ahead and sew it at the shoulder seams and side seams. You've probably already done this in through the tutorial, but I haven't, so I'm going to do it real quick. My bodice is ready. Instead of using my serger today, I just went ahead and used my sewing machine and then I pressed my seams open. You can press your seams to the back, you can press them open. The important thing is that you just press them because it makes everything look so much nicer. So I have my bodice inside out and my sleeve right side out because, well, it doesn't have an inside out. See what I did there? But I'm going to take it to where, remember, this is my shoulder point and this is my underarm seam. So I'm going to put it on the inside of my bodice and push it out through the sleeve. And I'm actually going to line up the shoulder with my shoulder seam. Then I'm going to line up the underarm with the side seam and pin there. And then I'm going to go ahead and pin at a midpoint on the front and the back, just to really make sure that I keep everything from moving on me. I have it pinned in, and you can sew it together with either a stretch stitch or a serger. So I'm going to go and do that. I will say that this is a size 5, and as they get smaller, it's a little bit easier if I put it under the sewing presser foot so that I'm sewing from the inside. So instead of trying to sew it like this, I'm actually going to open it up and put this underarm seam right under the presser foot. My finger is the presser foot. And then I'm going to sew it from the inside and push it around. I just find that a little bit easier with small sizes. All right, so my sleeve is now attached, and I'm ready to turn it right side out. You can give it a good press before you turn it inside out, or after, or both if you're feeling sassy. But now you're ready to do the other sleeve. You can either do a knot or a bow if it's long enough. It just depends on the size of your child's arm. I would actually wait to tie it till they try it on. But it's super cute and it's fancy. All right, have fun. Can't wait to see what you make. Remember, never stop sewing, never stop growing. See you soon.